I guess we can start now. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to the Destruction of Black Civilization weekly meetup from Countering Racism White Supremacy Book Club. We are now on chapter 4 and we're doing the development of writing. For me, to summarize the development of writing, so much information is, as usual, is validating for the insecurities that academia kind of gives us in terms of our place in society and our contributions, and just understanding the level of civilization and that was put forward before any civilization was done. It's just gratifying, and it's painful. It's painful in the sense that we still have to get it back. These are languages I have no connection to, but it's validating in the aspects that there's something worth going back and exploring and looking for. Like, rather than this Indiana type Jones characters who have interests, the people of the diaspora have something to hold of pride to go back and invest in. Yeah. And that's just to summarize how the development of writing was for me. Everybody's open to the floor.
This section, the development of writing, it stood out to me in order to understand the process of how writing was back then, and also how it was covered up and almost not destroyed, but silenced. And then, but I always knew prior, before reading this, is that Black writing, or hieroglyphics and all of these things, different writing and communication styles have been silenced and overpowered by other forms of writing. But I never really knew the exact storyline behind it, which just pretty much gave a storyline of almost an order to how things were and who used these forms of communication, where were they written on, and just how did people really communicate back then? Because here it's oh, if you're born here in this century, you're almost well, English always existed, and it's just it's not true, but that is what that's what you're taught in school. You're taught this in school every day, oh, this is the form of writing, everyone should be writing this. And then if you go to other countries, it's almost English is the most norm, or just the norm of what people learn. If you go to a different country, it's more acceptable to learn English than it is to learn a different language. And you'll see it too, because even when I go to if I were to go to somewhere and I only speak English, I can get around a little bit, due to having English. But if I were to speak a different language here and I went to a different country, I probably wouldn't get around at all, because no one would speak that language. So it's just very interesting how seeing this I don't want to call it this progress, but this this, not, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's just interesting to see this.
The development of writing, that section in particular showed me the development of many other aspects of African culture. He did talk about writing briefly, but I believe he talked about a lot of other things, especially iron and its development, and then Christian Africa, and basically the how Christianity was able to penetrate Africa so easily. Yeah, that's it.
I really appreciate this section for reminding us how first we have been taken to such a low position in society, and how yes, there was tons of African people who were decimated and brought to a position where they could no longer fight. But then we're introduced to the many Africans who fought to the very end, and that's a great example of deep self-respect. And also, I love discovering how the importance of writing, and how for a group of people to have invented writing, how devastating it is for one to lose that knowledge withheld in the writing. And also really important to learn about the iron industry and how it was hidden by the royal monopoly. Another indication on how monopolies and anything with the royal aspect to it is going to cause problems for people, which is why no one should be regarded as royal. There should be no monopolies. There should just be justice. And that's it for now.
Amazing, yeah. I read that resonates well with me. There's a part that I actually wanted to go by with everybody and ask questions in terms of how did it actually feel just hearing that hearing those attributes of the writing, and in terms of the Egyptian hieroglyphics being used separately to the African ones, and saying there was over 24. Let me just try and find exactly where that is.
It's on page 127 in the second paragraph.
Yeah, okay, perfect. For the Africans themselves had invented writing, all attempts to connect this ancient achievement with Egyptian or Asiatic influence have failed. Here, the external influences school has suffered a major defeat because of the written record found on statues, altars, tombstones, graffiti, etc. Were so distinctively African that their native origin could not be successfully disputed. Moreover, the African system of writing was very different from the Egyptian. It was simpler and had vowels, whereas Egyptians had none. There were 23 characters or letters in the African alphabet. Now, new concepts and new or special words could be easily introduced by the old picture system. Clarity and easy reading was assured by measured spacing between words. As a system of numerical symbols for mathematics was developed, the African inscriptions or monuments had such record as those found in royal tombs were in a special category. General writing was done on tablets of wood and skins prepared for that purpose. Such things as rocks, walls, bases, and broken bits and pieces of earthenware compromised either artifacts were ancient African writings were found. When I read this, what came to mind mainly was the fact that, especially after reading the rest of the chapter, what came to mind mainly was the fact that Ethiopia being so close and having their own writing system, and the Aramaic writing system and Hebrew ones that have been preserved, you see some form of you see some relation in these symbolism and these pictures, and to understand that the roots of it came from an African civilization, as opposed to how everything is supposed to be derived from Latin, and Latin is like almost the highest order of education you can learn. In rooting ourselves in this information, it redefines exactly what is important to learn and study, and it just gave more respect in the aspects of Ethiopia, Coptic Christianity, who've been able to like hold on to some of the languages. Yeah, so for me, the question I wanted to ask was how did that information hit you, interpret, and what are the things that it made you think of?
For me, it reinforced, it reinforced the developments that and the contributions that Africans have given to the world. So often we continue to hear that Africans contributed nothing, and he even goes on to talk about this in the book. But the development of writing, which led to so many other achievements, once again prove that Africans not only contributed to the world, but almost created the world that we live in and understand today. For if this developments were never made, who knows what kind of alphabets, who knows where the alphabet would be at now, the English alphabet, the Spanish alphabet, all language systems, where they would be at now if it wasn't for these ancient African writings. I was once told that, because he mentions they also developed the mathematical numerical symbols. I was often once told that if humans are ever to communicate with beings outside of Earth, that they would do that through math, that they would have to do that through numbers. So that, that's a very interesting aspect, that the Africans are actually credited with creating mathematics and the numerical symbol system. So it's almost as if they created a universal language.
Yes, most definitely. Sorry to jump in. It's just the fact that it reminded me of the Dogon tribe and how they have been able to hold on. They were first able to, the Dogon tribe originating in Mali, or from Mali, nomads who they've said have traveled down to Mali and settled there. Now you can imagine now from this information where they could have been spread out to from before, but they have it in their caves, drawings of what looks like a spider, but it's actually the melanocytes. So having information on melanin and its importance, as well as knowing exactly where Sirius B is, which is a star in our galaxy. And it took scientists how many years to be able to find out the accuracy that was already written in those cave walls that have been marked from centuries ago. So they have this information, and yet they're still able, through anthropology and archaeology being the ones to go and report this information through their documentaries, to still somehow claim the glory of it or just diminish the power of what's being said. Yeah. But yeah, the same question for anyone else who wants to answer.
Yeah, the whole reading just really clarified that everything, all technology, all civilization, everything originated with these, and I like what Ezekiel shared, that was profound. But I think everybody else is making contributions to what the Africans had established, the Black Africans everybody else just pitched in, right? They, like I said, every aspect of civilization, they talked about agriculture in here, being in this reading, the first agriculturalists. But more than anything else, what was emphasized in this little short read was how important and powerful religion played and spirituality played in Ethiopia, maintaining their power, and even actually Egypt, regarding Ethiopia as their main source of their religion, where their religion came from. And I just there's one little section here that I had to question, where he says Africans' actual belief in immortality. These structures were built to stand forever, and they believed, that's the problem I have, believed in immortality. This was their faith. I question that, included the natural assumption that those who had passed on their ancestors were living in the great beyond, and were therefore in the most favorable position to represent the interests of their kinsmen below, right? I don't think that was a belief. I think they knew it wasn't faith. I think they knew. I think they had knowledge and information, and it wasn't a question that they could not divorce themselves from, they could not ignore. And I think that had something to do with why they were finally and ultimately overthrown, because it just was unfathomable for them to give up their morality and their spirituality and their belief in God. And so and he talked about how they and also complacency too, complacency, you know. And I look at my own life, how complacency can destroy me, because I'm comfortable, and I can get complacent and just fall by the wayside and not continue the fight and not to continue to strive and success and further the cause, right? So yeah, that I was kind of rambling back and forth a little bit, but that's what I got out of it. So I just kind of. And what was the question again?
That was profound, actually. But I said, how did the reading and understanding of our writing systems that we had put in place, how that made you feel, and what are the first thoughts that had come into your mind from reading?
Okay. Yeah, that I think I answered that too, with the power of having established everything, starting with writing being the most important, and how it was lost because of the complacency.
After reading this section, I'm not sure. Like you said, how did it make me feel? I'm not sure the feeling that I got, because when I read through it, I kind of just was like, oh, okay. The form of writing, but I feel like it's just, I don't know if it's because I'm becoming to the point where it's like everything was destroyed, you know? And it's just like writing obviously was to me only because like what the language is and just different things that are happening in today's time. But just I think after reading just like how it has happened or how it happened, it just makes me interested. It makes me interested to continue reading and interested to really learn a little bit more. Just because I'm very curious about like all of these writings that were just like lost due to like I always say like colonization, but due to like people coming in here and push forth their own ways of communicating. But part of me is like, I wonder if like deep down, people still knew it. You know, it kind of reminds me of a bicycle, how if you learn how to ride a bike, you kind of just know it after a while. It may become rusty if you try it again, but you almost like still know it. Unless it has been like, I don't know how long it has been. But it almost makes me think like at that time, like even though because there was a lot of changes and shifts, especially throughout this section, where it's like, okay, they lost a lot of movement and leadership and a lot of movement in areas and migration and things like that. So I just wonders like if they kind of just like got too comfortable, as some others mentioned before, if like got too comfortable with what the new ways were, and they just didn't want to go back to what they invented, or if they kind of just kept it a secret within themselves of what they invented. Like, oh, this is going to be our sacred writing, and then we're not going to tell anyone that we're still practicing this, but X, Y, and Z. Just makes me interested to continue learning.
For me, it's it was just so very tragic. But I understand now that if we destroy the blueprint of a people, meaning their way to retain knowledge, remember knowledge, and spread knowledge to one another, then white supremacy has no problem decimating a group or giving them new languages that in turn will enslave them into their ideology and their way of thought. So just the importance of also not advancing, not taking technology forward. For example, not using iron when they had access to iron really allowed them to be decimated and allowed them to lose their papayas. Their, So which is like their ability to write and maintain writing. So it just allows me to understand white supremacy. The system of ancient white supremacy has long been in process, has long been going on, and has only been refined for throughout the thousands of years. But just to understand the importance of when a people loses their blueprint being how they existed and their laws and their way of life, it's not that hard to destroy them, as white supremacy has shown us.
Yeah, that's the truth. Does anybody else have anything they would like to read from?
The English alphabet consists of 20.
I was just confirming. I was just confirming how many letters are in the English alphabet. I knew it was 26, but I was just like, I hadn't thought of it for a long time. And it just,
sorry, from what I know, the letter J is only like 600 years old. So that's one of a recent addition to the alphabet.
That's why Jesus could not be that guy's name. if and he mentions these biblical characters in this section too. And I've been recently questioning if they were even real people, even because they have sarcophagus and tombs, and I mean not tombs, but mummies of like King Tut and a lot of ancient kings and queens in Egypt. They have the evidence there, the bodies, the tombs, the graves, and all of that.
Yeah.
Where are the tombs for Jesus, Joseph, Mary, John, Luke, Mark, Matthew, Paul? None of them, not one.
Wow.
Can be found. They have no grave sites.
I guess white supremacy didn't really get the idea of show don't tell.
Right. And then that they had vowels, and the Egyptians didn't have vowels. That and like you mentioned that writing skill enabled them to develop the number system, and how they were they were able to blot it out, and still proclaim, and people still believe that we have never developed our own civilization. It's just to revisit this. You asked how we felt. To revisit this is so fulfilling. To absorb this information. And just one other thing that I highlighted here. How significant the reservoir system was. And how they not only used their architecture for ornamental purposes and grandiosity, but for survival, and how well that worked for them.
Yeah, that highly resonated with me as well. I actually just wanted to read that little statement just to add context to what you were saying. I rate the reservoirs as the supreme achievement because they reflect the real measure of African man as he met the challenge to survival head on, with constructive counter attack against the adverse forces of earth, sun, and the sky. The irrigation system made reasonably effective with their oxen-powered wheels was a part of the challenge to adverse circumstances. Just that mentality shows you that, because one thing that the whole European mentality on and the degrading of removing humanity from people of African people or people of African descent is the fact that we're uncivilized and not fit to take care of ourselves. Yet the very systems that were created by Africans is used today to civilize their civilizations. The toilet system, the plumbing system, the irrigation, the ability to be able to farm a crop. I'm not saying that they would have, I don't know if they would have had wisdom in this in any way, shape, or form, but the development of Western society today is foundation, is exactly this. And we couldn't be yet more far removed on the social status of respect and respectability in society for contributions. And of course, we can't directly say, oh well, my father came up with this idea, or my uncle came up with this idea, but our people, our DNA came up with this information, and it's in our DNA to be able to have the understanding of it. But we've grown up in a Western society where we're like, oh wow, I'm so lucky to live in the West, where the sewer system is clean, and our hygiene, and we can't just get famine-made diseases on the basis of like poor hygiene or poor development in the environment. It literally lets you rule out all these blames that we have for why we're undeveloping, and really point the fingers at who it is that's doing all the works behind the scene, and then putting the camera in front of them, and then asking for money to help these environments where the knowledge is there. They just need to be given the freedom to have access to it, and would be removed from that mentality of survival.
Yeah, in Yurugu a couple of weeks ago, she really talked about what that meant. The whole what it means to, in the European context of, we live longer, we don't have diseases, what that actually means for non-white people across the world. But I don't want to go off too much on that. I enjoyed this section in particularly because I like to think O5, because rather than this is a learning. We're learning here. We're learning about tragedies as well, great things, but also tragedies. So he goes on to talk. He starts to talk about the other African societies that went into barbarism and savagery because they gave up too readily and refused to ignore tribal lines. So those that refuse to unite for the common struggle of just survival, and really how basically, in my understanding, didn't really contribute much because of that. And then he moves on to talk about the great and glorious Africans who fought through the centuries for what I would like to believe, which is justice, their survival. They fought forces of man and nature, and then they came up with the reservoirs, which he says is the most significant, one of the more significant monuments or inventions or achievements of their time. Which really, the reservoirs, they're such a great achievement because they, like you read, they showed the Africans intellect and how they were able to meet challenges to survival head on, compared to the other groups who gave in to being conquered, gave into, I guess, death and famine. And this happened really from uniting and coming together for the common goal of survival. I forgot. There's a yeah. So and he also goes on to mention how I guess these reservoirs were hiding the where was it? The reservoirs were more significant than the monuments important, as these were in hiding the Black man's intellectual achievements in the invention of writing deep under the sand. So I guess he's using, in that sense, he's using it as a comparison to like the pyramids, whereas the reservoirs are, things that you can see that the Africans created, whereas the pyramids kind of were hiding everything that African intellectuals, created, like their writings and stuff underneath the sand in the pyramids, which, people have to go out and discover. But when you go to these places, you can see the reservoirs that, in order for the African people to survive here, they had to create those. And that could only have been achieved by an intellectual people. And it is a tragedy, truly, because from that to where we are today, tragic.
Yeah, that was good. I like that. You know, how it just reflects so much of what's happening today. Um, but he also mentions here on 133 where like where you mentioned the most remarkable of the facts was that even those groups that were pushed back into a state of barbarism still held on, God only knows how, to some of the basic institutions of the society from which they descended from 1 to 2,000 years before. Neither Christian Europe or Muslim Asia were able to completely destroy those institutions, even in the vast regions over which both had supreme control. So I think that speaks to what you mentioned, Mary, that those people, the Dagon tribe that had the dog star, that they're still there, and they're still there resisting the Muslims, the Islamic terrorism and Islamic invasion that's going on there, and they refuse the Christian development of Europe too. And and that's where Timbuktu is. So I'm sure that we'll get further into into this book where he's gonna. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure that he's gonna talk about the development of the oldest university in modern history. You know.
One of the areas too, just to add to that, one of the areas that stood out to me as I was reading through this was the part about Africans focusing on like agriculture. Because I know it was mentioned before that we're like, why didn't they use like iron, more to help like with technology and advancement, quote advancement. And I think like one of the things too is like most Africans, it says on page 131 that they were agriculturists. And I think that's very important to think like as a people, like what was going on within their minds. They're like, okay, we need to expand agriculture and consider like farming more and all of these things in order to like, that was their way of being like self-sustaining. But from over here, like if you think about like what the others did, they're like, hey, we're gonna take this like copper and what was it? I believe it was like copper, stone, and all these other things that are natural in order to progress us in technology and all of these other methods that they used it instead of like focusing on agriculture. And then seeing like if you fast forward all the way to today, it's like thinking of Europeans, like they don't really farm or agriculture. Like that's not their thing. They don't focus on that. They're focusing more on like, again, this idea of like technology and quote this progress that happens with creating more technologies. But if you think of other cultures and other groups, they're more focusing, they have a lot of farms, they're growing things, they're sustaining in food. So it's just thinking of like what were they most focused on. And although they are focused on like building these things that could withstand like generations and the whole immortality thing too. So just thinking about like it's almost like a twofold thing where it's like we're gonna do these things, but we're still gonna focus on like farming and agriculture because this is gonna like progress us. But it also actually got the best of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he mentions that right here, prosperity too may have blurred the African's vision. Too much success can be dangerous. In this case, so much wealth was piled up from foreign trade, especially in gold, ivory, and copper, that the question of iron, if raised, may have been dismissed as economically unsound. So they even back then they were looking at the money, creativity, I mean, ostrich feathers, pageantry, Glamour. Isn't that how we kind of are today?
Rich textiles, yeah.
Well, yeah, we what, but just our culture is look at Black people today. If you see a Bentley, it's usually a Black person driving it, right?
Mhm.
In LA, or like if we get some money, we gotta have we wear the jewelry. We're glitter boys, we like
But you see, so what you're saying right now is really drawing to my attention that we know who we are, but we come into knowing who we are. Whereas European history will tell you, white supremacy and its agenda has known who we are for the longest. So they know us better, not better than we know ourselves, but they know our behavior patterns, and they probably look for those patterns, and removing all the higher attributes of our morality and completely whitewashing that, the other elements that remain there were of wanting to exude pride, or wanting to flash, to be flashy. But remember, prior we had the morality to go along with it. So even if we did flash, it will be like, oh, I'll work hard, I can flash. But whereas right now we don't have the, oh, I'll work hard, I can flash. We have the, I need to flash in order to have value, like now, sort of thing. So in understanding that, they have commodified that need for value, and in understanding that it's in Black people's nature to want to exude like a peacock. But yeah, but paralyzing us in the realms of morality, so it's never channeled in the best way as a massive culture. But you'd see that, I say that, but then you look at the Black Panthers, and you look at even just the old statement of all Black, you can't look at some of those images and not be like, that's one, not even like a cool person, that's one bad, like basically owning your style and owning how you exude yourself was also a part of the power. But now it's just a gimmick of expression because white supremacy has whitewashed our minds.
Man, that's man, that was profound.
Part of me thinks of when we're talking about the whole like flashing thing, it's like when you almost compare, like I feel like it would be different all around the world. I can say like for certain because I'm not all around the world, I'm here. But the idea of like flashing would be different in like other places. And the only reason why I say that is because like here it's like you're almost like, the reason why the flashing is here is because the flashing is, as you guys mentioned, like value. And that's how Europeans see themselves. They see themselves as like, they obtain value through what they have, how much power they have, what the things they have. So it's like here, your brain is trying to like calibrate to be on the Europeans' wave. And that is the reason why, like, oh, if I don't have X, Y, and Z, I'm not valued. But if I have X, Y, and Z, I'm valued. And that's just like the way Europeans think. So it's like there's almost like obtaining of European acceptance because we're in the state, But I think like if you go somewhere else, I'm not sure if it would be the same idea of like of wanting European acceptance, because I can't imagine like a European standing in front of you saying, you know what I mean? Like I just feel like the amount of Europeans here, I say here as in like where I'm at in the States, is different than like, whereas like, I'm trying to think of somewhere else, like a different place. It'd be like totally different. Like even back then, I kind of imagine like I know we read here where it's like, oh, we got like from the text, like, oh, they're flashing. But part of me just thinks like, it wasn't necessarily like the flash they're trying to do. It was more of just like to survive, like, oh, we need to do X, Y, and Z with the materials we have and what we can just to survive because people are here and taking it. But it just makes me wonder like what it looks like differently, because obviously like here in the States and European culture is like value again is and what you have. So like that's why so many people and so many cultures here in the States, like even African Americans here in the States, they will flash because they're obtaining like white acceptance.
I wanted to add that Uh, well, in the context of the flashing from the book, I feel that that is outside of white supremacy, right? White supremacy hasn't necessarily been hasn't grown, hasn't expanded to the scale it is today. So when these people were flashing, I guess it's just a part of, you know, showing. I don't want to say showing off, but just showing, you know, looking fashionable, looking nice. Whereas today, in the context of white supremacy, you know, doing that kind of flashing is considered showing off, and it doesn't really go towards producing justice. You know, in this time period, they could afford to do that. I guess they could afford to flash, but uh, today it should be considered showing off. But then at the same time, it's just, I guess, us as non-white people doing, I guess, doing what our ancestors did as well. So maybe it's just a part of our DNA to kind of flash.
Like if you look at the most flashy, the flashiest black people on the planet, Black Americans first, of course, are like in another stratosphere, but second is Nigerians. No, Nigerians might be more, might be worse. I think Nigerians are worse. They glitter, boy. But see, I think is what crystallized for me when Ray, is that Ray, when Nana was talking, was that everything is twisted exactly the opposite of righteous and correctness. And so those people did that grandiosity with all of the pyramids. I understand it's theorized that the caps of the pyramid, the top stone was solid gold on some of them, and they were used as communication because gold is the most conductive of all metals, right? Um, but the reason, so that why I say the opposite, because they put God first, they put their spirituality first. And as a result of their morality and their spirituality first, they were able to acquire all of this grandiosity. It wasn't them that was making this, all of this grandiosity. It was the spiritual world. It was their spirituality that made everything possible. And so as a celebration to God, they would be glamorous. They would be glitter. They would be pageant, you know, all of that glory. And so the white supremacist system has taken it and turned it completely reverse so that the glory and the grandeur is supposed to bring you the joy. It's supposed to bring you closer to God, when it's the abject opposite. The pursuit of the material world is what is diametrically opposed to God, if that makes sense, you know. So in order to achieve the material success is determined by your spirituality and your morality, and like I said, it's the opposite now.
Wow, that's a great point. I didn't even think about it like that. But yeah, combination of that. I would definitely agree that now today the flashing, the showing off compared to how it was back then, you know, bringing you closer to God definitely takes you further away from God. If anything, you definitely people will, in my opinion, start to exhibit things where they consider themselves above gods, or you know, just the material success takes them further away from connecting with people, connecting with spirituality and etc. So very good point.
Yeah, I really liked what Ben had said about gold being used as a conductor on being placed on top of the pyramids for communication, because the information that I had as to why those tops are like all missing is because of the Asian and Arab invaders and the European invaders who had come and excavated, and first things first is taking these gold monuments or destroying them. And apparently the pyramids also had like a layer of like a semi-precious crystal, and that was taken off as well. Um, and for me, the saying that's there for communication also allows me to understand that even the gold that would be worn that's so flashy also probably had a spiritual purpose as well. In Islam, it's said that it's almost prohibited for men to wear gold, and I thought to myself, why would apparently that would have to be silver, and I thought, why can't men wear gold? And then when I understood that it's a high conductor, and I thought of black men wearing gold, I thought I didn't know about white supremacy as its name and beast that it is today, but I knew that it was suppressive. I understood it was suppressive. Also in Islam, you have to cut your hair, or you can't grow like locks. It's like forbidden or something. And also, why would that be a thing if it's not? You can grow your beard, but you can't grow your hair. Why would that be an issue if it's not suppressive to the spiritual nature, once you understand the attributes that have doing these things actually have for our people? And the main point that I wanted to come around to, that I was sparked by, was the fact that we had a use for these jewelries and wearing them, or be wanting to be a high conductor, especially if you're glorifying or going to a place of worship, or just trying to resonate in a high energy. It would make sense to wear that and have the. I think that is exactly what I meant by not having the morality aspect that we had before, but still having that sensational need in the DNA to amplify in that way. But through the conditioning of white supremacy, it's been completely polarized to the opposite way of doing things, or the reasons for doing things. We need to really remove those frequencies, and because that's another thing. And coming away from white supremacy and coming away from these things in society, we don't need to like become monks. Also, we can still express ourselves, but have the morality and know the reason or spiritual purpose as to why you're wearing a crystal, a piece of jewelry, or understanding the effects that it has on you when you are wearing this, like being a higher conductor. Like, I wouldn't want to be a higher conductor in an all-white environment. I will feel like I'm going to be hawked at. I'll do it in the right spaces.
Now we're all flaunting blood diamonds. Tragic. I wanted to talk about the iron. That section particularly made me think about the code and how he says to learn something about everything. And I know that it says that Africans knew about iron, but I guess due to their prosperity with copper, gold, and ivory, they didn't care for iron. So thinking about the code and thinking in terms of a nation, I think it would be important that as a nation, they could have probably afforded to have somebody growing that iron industry, which would have been far more beneficial to them and wouldn't have put them in the position that they were in. He did mention the royal secret, the secretive royal monopoly. I'm not entirely sure. I was a little bit confused with that, but from what I understand is that there was a royal monopoly on iron smelting, which I guess means that only a few people were allowed to smelt iron, which he says rigidly limited production. He goes on to say, here was fear outmatching both reason and the most elementary common sense. I'm on 132 as well. This over secretiveness, which inhibited the expansion of iron production, was to contribute mightily to the success of Assyrian arms over them. So I'm not entirely sure what that highly secretive royal monopoly did, but if I understood it correctly, I assume that it was the reason why iron production was halted in Africa. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I would see. I would say it falls into line of very very uncodified behavior, whereas we're having a small group of people withholding information from the larger majority of people, because if you're under constant attack and your enemies are bringing in weaponry using iron, logic would say, okay, we need to get on board and start producing weapons and defenses, including iron. But it seems that greed, power, and control over knowledge and the resource of iron was much more important than black unity or protecting oneself from the ancient system of white supremacy. That's my take on the whole iron thing and how that is a clear example of withholding constructive information.
And it's very profound. And in addition to that, what you just shared, here at the bottom of 131, following Pikani following Kashta in 720 BC began what was quickly to become again one of the greatest world powers of the time. Ethiopia was united with Afro-Asian Egypt under a single imperial rule that extended from the Mediterranean in the north to an undefined boundary in the south. They had, and it's true, those people, there's Toro tribe in Uganda, and it also, they look like Ethiopians, but they swear they're not Ethiopian. They say they came from Uganda, not Ethiopia, the Toro people. And it says also unknown was how far its eastern boundary extended southward along the Indian Ocean coastline, how much of Uganda and Abyssinia was included, or how far westward the empire extended. And then it says all this is not so important as to the point that during this period of triumph, world fame, fear, and unprecedented prosperity from a flourishing trade with about one half of the world, African rulers continued to neglect the updating of their military and naval defenses. They got arrogant. They were cocky. That's what's happening with the United States of America right now. We think we're the shit. But I think the mistake, I think they learned from this. I think the English learned from this. I think what you said earlier is true. They do know us better than we know ourselves. And they studied this and kept it a secret and used it to control the entire world. That's why England built the largest navy that history has ever known up until the United States Navy. And they were so great sitting on their thrones. We don't have to worry about it. They're ants. They're cockroaches. We can crush them. They ain't shit. And it was true. It was true. And they just hung in. They just hung in. And instead of they just survived. If you look at, I was looking at the condition of the people in England while they were building the English Navy. They were starving. People were starving. They just totally neglected the people to build this Navy. So
I think that's why it's important to get a system of justice, because this is, while people are prospering and flourishing, we have to at the same time be concerned about military and naval defenses. I can't imagine, constantly I can't imagine being constantly under attack. But they definitely did become complacent in that area. But I think that's even more of a reason why we need a system of justice. So all the world's people can live, be prosperous and flourish. Let's just trade with each other peacefully, without greed.
Some profound statements. Yes. Is there any more that anyone would like to say about the development of writing, or can we move on to Christian Africa?
Just that the iron culture seems to have played a massive role in the development of the world. A role that I guess did not know of and underestimated, but it seems to be just as large as the industrial revolution that they speak of so much, and the technological revolution, and etc. It seems like ironwork was definitely a huge contributor to the development of the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's so true. And what you said just there, it really got me thinking about the fact that, of course, as all achievements are hidden, the Greek mythology, because of course Greek myth or Greek civilization is the cradle of their own civilization, or of where the white supremacists claim their civilization came from. But we know better and have the understanding that the Greek civilization was literally they're literally the students of Africa. All the philosophers have talked about in their journals and ventures of where they had gained their knowledge in these places of Napata, and being welcomed in there and talking about the people whom were their scholars and teachers before them. But I say all of this just to say that it's still hidden even within their own mythology. They just won't give you a name. But I can't remember the name of the blacksmith welder, but he was given power by Zeus to be the only one to weld the weapons for the gods, and he was extremely hideous, but yet he married Aphrodite. I know this because I love Greek mythology, but the point is, when I think about that character in particular being like the hideous of Zeus's children and wanting to live alone and be by himself, but he's the blacksmith welder that can yield powerful weapons. Getting information like this and understanding Africa's connection to the building, the use of iron ore and having to use it in weaponry, and of course with intentions that I'm not going to sit here and say that our people are 100% righteous, but if your intentions are literally to defend, then the might of your sword is a righteous blade. So it will make sense to me as to why Greek mythology would have these little hidden anecdotes of just these little attributes that their gods have. We can find ways to decipher and see how they're talking about us. And my opinion in that whole character and that whole description that they've given of one of Zeus's god children is Africa's contributions to iron. And there's no reason that I know, and it makes sense to me now why it's called a blacksmith, to be a blacksmith, to yield and make iron.
Yeah, that's deep. And just to add on right quick, that they knew the importance of the iron is shown by the fact that the kings and high priests were often heads of the guild, and the chief iron master would often gain the status of what a prime minister is today. You know, that determined, that's almost like how the military is set up. You know, the baddest, you know, traditionally the baddest boy in the military is the general, and then becomes the king. But right here at the end, just before we end this writing section, blacks and almost had blacks. Wait, forgetting the names of ancient centers of importance was nothing compared to the tragedy of the blacks and almost completely forgetting the very art of writing which they themselves invented. This was one of the most tragic losses to repeat that was ever suffered by a whole people. And in view of the anti-black course of subsequent history, the blacks needed their written language and records more than any other people. So that's why, since it's very unlikely that we're going to recapture the language, although I mean the writing, uh, at some point we can galvanize on a language. The two I have in mind is something that we already kind of speak, which is like the Geeches have their Creole in South Carolina, in the Carolinas, and the Creoles in Louisiana have their Creole that they speak, like in Jamaica and Belize, they speak Creole. We need a language. And at some point, we got to get together on a language. I think it should be Swahili. The BGF, the BGF here, the prison gang, it's like the most fierce prison gang in the country. The BGF, the Black Guerrilla Family, started in Oakland. It was the soldiers. It was the Black Panthers. It was the militant branch of the Black Panthers that started the BGF. Um, Actually, Huey Newton started the BGF. Anyway, that's another story. But they speak Swahili. Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to try to,
Definitely not a stretch. So Swahili is something I've definitely wanted to learn since I came into the understanding that it will be a good way for Pan-Africanists to have a global language that we can speak in business meetings alone, like that we can just communicate and have that amongst ourselves in a room the same way it's becoming really like prominent because of the way Chinese culture have built themselves, that it's actually an asset to you to learn Mandarin. I want us to try our best to push towards it being a commodity or being of use to you to learn Swahili. Like there's benefits in there for you. Like it's an attribute that someone will do now and with respect as well as just being it for money. Yeah.
Mhm. And speaking of the Chinese, you see how seriously they take their writing. They took their writing to another level.
Classes.
It's like a serious art form. I mean, they don't play about it, and it's like they're so proud and so. I mean, and I think that's probably the reason, is because they historically saw that the origin was lost.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the how your Chinatowns are in America, but over here in the UK, the Chinatown is beautiful. Of course, it's used as a tourist attraction, as well as having restaurants there where they cater to people with their traditional food. Whether it be gimmicky or not, if you go around the back of the very corners or the top of these buildings, what they're using their places for is Chinese lessons for English lessons for the people who need to learn English, or Chinese lessons for the young children growing up in this environment who do not know their language, and and calligraphy lessons so they can learn how to write Mandarin as well. And it's literally plastered all over. So there's the business section for the consumer to like
Wow.
walk past, and you can buy your cupcakes and bubble tea, but you just look one step above and it literally says Chinese lessons so through this door, and you just see that they separate, or they have, as well as having a business, they've allowed that space to be used for their culture and not just a tourist attraction. Whereas I'm not sure of where we have any of that kind of establishment of the for ourselves, or part of the diaspora, to learn the language and learn a writing style towards it. That's kind of unheard of for me right now in terms of it being a part of the community, unfortunately.
Just to add on top of the language, I feel that Africans can create a new language. I see a lot of efforts in the news and the media of Africa to unify wholly by giving all African nations a single passport, allowing them to travel through countries, without any issues. Which, which according to logic, at least logically to me, which would mean that people from different languages would be interacting a lot more. Therefore, they would probably need to create a new whole language that could possibly come, just one whole language that the whole continent speaks and understands, similar to maybe English. So I think that would be a great thing to codify and help African people not repeat some of the mistakes from the past. If that makes sense. 'Cause I think one issue that he raises in this book was that the many different languages became a barrier to these people, but they could still hold on to their language while also learning, a new unified language.
That's the absolute beauty of Swahili, because that's what it is. It's Arabic, and depending on where you go on the East Coast, if you're up north, like say the northernmost people that speak Swahili would be in Kenya. The southernmost would be in Mozambique. They can understand each other, but it's a conglomeration of the different tribal languages and Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the unifying language of Africa. Really, that was the plan, in fact.
Yeah. Is Swahili Bantu rooted? Is one of the root languages in Bantu.
It's Arabic and then the Bantu languages.
Yeah, which unites Uganda, South Africa, all of the lower regions of going down towards South Africa. There will be some roots or dialects in it that you can understand. Zimbabwe, I think as opposed maybe Aramaic, which of course Arabic is derived from Aramaic. I don't know. Oh yeah. Oh, Aramaic is older than Arabic, I think.
That's the language Jesus spoke.
Wow. Speaking of Yeshua, Jesus, Christian Africa.
There we go.
Very short but very sweet, and just a quick glance of to summarize Christian Africa is to talk about Christian Africa, and for me, I'll just read the beginning the beginning aspects of it. Africa was naturally among the first areas to which Christianity spread. It was next door to Palestine, and from the earliest times there had been the closest relations between the Jews and the Blacks, both friendly and hostile. The exchange of pre-Christian religious concepts took place easily, and due to the residence of so many ancient Jewish leaders in Ethiopia, Abraham, Joseph, and his brothers, Mary and Jesus, the great lawgiver Moses was not only born in Africa, but was also married to the daughter of the African priest. The pathway for the earlier Christian church in the land of the Blacks had been made smooth and many centuries before. I'm going to stop it there because we get the context. But for me, I really enjoy the fact that he's just giving information and aligning it in a way that is literally singing to you. Christianity, or the creation of Christianity, is rooted in African stories, is rooted in things that happened on the African continent, whether it be the names of the people that they're describing, or even the Garden of Eden has been traced back to Ethiopia. There's anything that is remotely related to evidential based truth of Christianity is buried in Africa, and that's the only way that they can actually validate and understanding how we have been like displaced, and that those regions, or those the power regions of the places where we had developed the most level of civilization being taken over by Arabs now. We hear what's happening in Palestine, how Israel is trying its best not to recognize it and overtake it as well for whatever reasons. What is happening there is a perfect example of probably what was happening to the people of African civilization there before. So the point, I say all of this to say the fact that Palestine was being taken over then. I believe that people of African descent were spread amongst these places, like especially Jordan. Jordan has a history of Hapatia, who was one of the holders of Egyptian knowledge and was actually a philosopher and teacher to her people, and was dragged through by the church because of the doctrine that she was preaching, or sharing scientific knowledge, or just its combination. I believe that all these people also were African, or even displaced from Egypt being taken over and spreading out. So yeah, the basis of the information for me is that the Christian Africa, the root of Africa is Christian. And in searching and getting in touch with African heritage, you can strip the European mentality and still call yourself a Christian or an anointed one, but through the understanding and getting the correct name, so that when you're calling them ancestrally, you are energizing yourself and the right ancestors.
Well said.
Very well said.
Anyone else's thoughts on the Christian Africa?
My thoughts really are just, I guess, a brief history of Christian Africa. Sorry, Christian Africa. I didn't really know, or I didn't fully understand. I've just had bits and pieces about how a lot of the things that transpired in the Bible actually did happen in Africa. So this just kind of reinforced how how there was already African religions going on, and Christianity came much, much later. And he even goes on to say that in a different work, he suggests that a major reason why so many later Christian missionaries failed in Africa was because they were bringing refurbished religious doctrines that came from Africa in the first place. So really, everyone just got this whole idea of Christianity from Africa. One thing that makes me think about is the religion in the context of African spirituality, and I guess this Christianity religion, and really how we oftentimes don't see religion as a very horrible thing. But I think that but religion is what gave Africans their sense of purpose. A lot of the things that they did achieve couldn't have been done unless they were a religious people, which is also one of their biggest downfalls, as the author states. So them being conquered, Christianity coming in to Africa is really because they're such a religious people. So I assume that they were accepting of other religions because they themselves kind of had multiple religions and different religions. So as far as present day Ethiopia and their Christian religion, I don't understand that, but I think this is kind of giving me some context into their ideas, because hearing some Ethiopians speak about Christianity just in videos and that I've seen, it's very interesting. They claim not to be of Africa and claim not to be of Palestine either, so very interesting.
For me, through this section, the Christian Africa, the part where it talks about like sacrifices, I think that is where I was like, makes sense. Because obviously, like throughout history, it's just like this continuous idea of like, oh, God told me to do this. God told me to sacrifice people, and it's it's alongside the idea of like washing sins. So it's just like, in order to be pure, you must like harm something. And to me, that doesn't sound like alarming, and then if someone were like, oh, in order to wash your sins you have to kill someone or sacrifice someone, and although it said here like, oh, they did it with like animals, but it also said sometimes with humans. I'm not sure if it's in this section or it continues on, within the next pages. I believe it was actually at the end of 138, but it talks about like how the sacrifice was also with humans. And it just makes it interesting how like a religion, a God is telling you to kill someone in order to like be washed of your sins, like your individual sin. So it just kind of stood out.
Yeah, and this section reminded me of an experience that happened yesterday. I was sitting outside of a restaurant, and there was black male. He was talking to me about his business, and out of nowhere he said, "You know, black people are the children of Israelites," and just goes on to like a bunch of what I believe to be nonsense from the Bible. So I tell them that the most powerful religion on the planet is white supremacy, and all non-white people are prisoners of war. I'm not some Israelite. I'm not any label from the Bible. I'm a prisoner of war. But what that tells me is that black people are just looking for anything to attach themselves to, something, any sort of spiritual, any sort of religion they can grasp. And also reminds me of from the book how Chancellor Williams says that explains how the Africans were just regurgitating and spreading these religions given to them by other people instead of trying to produce justice or understanding the importance of justice, because everything was taken from them. So the inkling of so-called religion they get, they become like the masters of it. The master slaves, being able to regurgitate doctrines, languages not of their natural native tongue. Just goes to show what's been done to Black people and how we are just searching for justice, but we don't have the language to say so.
Just to crystallize that point, that was excellent. What the writer says is that the major reason why so many later Christian missionaries failed in Africa was because they were bringing refurbished religious doctrines that came from Africa in the first place. And that's where it was mentioned that the religious belief in sacrifice for the remission of sins was an African belief and practice at least 2,000 years before Abraham. Which causes me to go back to the paragraph back in the last section. An integral part of the Iron Rule was the introduction of the conqueror's speech and writing, the first step in the process of conquering the soul and minds of the Blacks along with their bodies, right? This was easy, somebody mentioned, because the knowledge-starved people eagerly grasped Arabic, French, Portuguese, English, or German as the best route to status in the new civilization. So unfortunately, they knew, and they took, well, the Greek names of the Holy Family, original Holy Family, was Osiris, Isis, and Horus. But the Egyptian names were Aset, Asir, and Heru. And I believe the story goes that Aset was sacrificed. The father was sacrificed. His body was chopped up, thrown into the Nile, and because there was famine, and so because he was thrown into the Nile, and that's why it's an involved story. A big catfish ate him, and stuff. It's involved, and I don't remember the whole story, but it was able to fertilize the entire Nile and bring life back to the people. And Heru was the son came back, was resurrected as a result. And so all Christianity is exactly, it's just a retelling of a story that we, even the same story. I'm not sure if the Babylonian, I think the Egyptians, Asir and Heru may be older than the Babylonian story, but the Babylonian story in the Bible of Nimrod, Ishtar, and Tammuz, that might even be older, right? And all of those, I don't know where I'm going with this, but all of those, and even the Christian church today, they don't even realize that they're worshiping the Son. All Christians don't worship Christ. They're Son worshipers, and they don't even know it. The Sabbath day is on Saturday. They worship on Sunday, for one thing. They've been deceived into worshiping the Son, and they say the Son of God. They call Jesus the Son of God. It's all this deception going on in Christianity, right? It's so twisted. And when you start reading this stuff and understanding the history of that Christianity, you realize that you know what they've taken, the sacrifices that were made by the ancient Egyptians, the people of the sun that created all of this, the sacrifices. There you go. Thank you. Is that in order for us as a people in living in cooperation, see, they lived in cooperation then. The rule was cooperation. That was the law. The law now is competition. Now there was competition involved in the human nature in the system of cooperation, but the system was cooperative, not competitive. Now it's competitive where you have to have a little bit of cooperation involved. It's the opposite, you know. And where was I going? So the sacrifice was a spiritual act. I have to sacrifice my own self-centered wants, needs, and desires for the group so that we all can. So, and then at the end of the sacrifice, I benefit from that. It helps me. I thrive. I gain even more prosperity because of this good investment that I made, you know, in the sacrifice. And then in order for the sacrifice to be protected, to preserve, and for it to work and go forward, that means I have to be forgiving. I have to forgive those whom I'm sacrificing for. If I'm sacrificing for the group, there may be someone in the group that I have a problem with. There might be somebody in the family who you know, all family, you know what I mean, that I really don't want to sacrifice for. So in order for the cooperative system to continue to work, I have to forgive that person for whom I'm sacrificing. And that's all Jesus, if you're a Christian, that's all Jesus said. Look, I'm sacrificing my life and I'm forgiving those, because when they nailed him to the cross, he said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And you know, I believe that is where the whole bastardized ritual of sacrifice was lost. Where Ray was saying, you know, I gotta sacrifice you, so for my sins, that sounds like some bullshit. You know, no, that is some bullshit. And that's why Christianity is a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, I just said it. All right, sorry.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Are there any more shares for the Christian Africa?
I just felt like Christian Africa and the beginning of chapter 5 were kind of the same, like one in the same sections. I just wanted to, there's a part, I just wanted to read this part on 136, where they talk about the only difference really. It says, we're really from the beginning of the chapter. It says, from the early African viewpoint, there is nothing earth-shaking or extraordinary about the establishment of still another cult, the cult of Christian churches. So this isn't the first time we've heard this. I've heard numerous times with different indigenous groups that, you know, religion isn't something that's new to them. Many people come with their religions and leave with their religions. But then they say the only unusual thing about the new cults of Christians was that while they disclaimed being of the Jewish faith, they worship the Jewish tribal God, the God of Israel. The Christians seem to be expanding the role of a God who had been concerned only with the Jews as his chosen people to a God of the universe, the sun God. So this made me think about white supremacy tactic, confusion, or, you know, spreading confusion around. We see so many African people thinking that they are the chosen people or they're God's chosen people. And there was one other thing, so the confusion and damn, I just lost my mind. It just left my head. There's another thing I wanted to say on top of that. Can't remember right now, but that's what I wanted to say. Confusion. If it comes back to me, I'll chime in with it. But I found that to be very interesting. Oh, and also wait, it almost came back. Something to do with Europeans. Can't remember. I'm not gonna take up too much time. Somebody else can share.
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things to understand is that so-called Christianity is an amalgamation of ancient African knowledge that has been used by white supremacy to spread a lot of confusion and deceit amongst non-white people. It's nothing more than a tool used to keep white supremacy going, and that's what counter racists should see it as. And when we're like told that we are God's chosen people, children of Israelites, I would ask questions: chosen to do what? For what constructive purposes? For what constructive results? Because it seems like if you are chosen for anything, it's to be subject to the system of white supremacy, and no logical thinking person should want to be chosen for that. Um, also, yeah, just from my experience yesterday, it just shows me how poisonous religion Christianity is. Like, there's no saving grace. There's nothing of value that can be found in any religion on planet Earth, any religions on planet Earth, because the strongest religion is white supremacy. And understanding that will take a lot of people exactly where they need to go, which is hopefully to using their brain computers to produce justice.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, Mary. I remembered. It was hypocrisy. So about how the Europeans went around spouting Christianity, using it as a means of universal brotherhood, but then there's a chosen people. So they're also in the same sentence saying that God has reserved this for his chosen people, which I have to assume would be Europeans. And really, hypocrisy, all it does in its aftermath is leave more confusion for, you know, non-white people. So that's what I wanted to add.
The truth.
Where did we read up to? How far did we read up?
138.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say that, well, after what I was going to say, that I actually got it confused. I think it was based on, I'm not going to make excuses. I got it confused, and upon hearing it, I do remember now that I was supposed to read to 138, but I stopped here. So we can continue, and I'll just listen to the last chapter and then give my summary of what I'd read so far.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say was I agree in terms of the hypocrisy of Christianity, it being used to subdue you while they advance and do what they're doing, but it's because they've assumed the role of God in Christianity. So we are the sacrifice, we are Jesus. They are the ones who get to benefit from that. And that's the concept of the chosen one. And of course, we talk about it in Urugu, that ideology of individualizing ourselves, but as the oneness is as a people, because it's on a global scale that the sacrifice is happening. Mentality, right to thrive, right to even that have that knowledge of self prior to being 11 is a bit, it's like a purposeful tool. The socialization that's done is like a purposeful birthright removed from us from birth, literally. Yeah, we need to claim that back ASAP. And also what I wanted to say is, because the way that Christianity has been coded, like White Supremacy has done, they've tried to globalize everything in a way that they are universal. So they've universalized this coded Bible of indoctrination, but they have a code where they can read it in a way that you can pick up some information from it, because it's still records that are, I guess, to be accounted for in a way, as much as it's been exaggerated or spun around. There are some verses there that of course been taken out, the most prominent and important ones, waiting for us to go and excavate from under the Vatican. But the ones that are there are like Deuteronomy. There are some ways that you can read it that will inform the higher priest who is given the sermon. And the best way that I'd say to do that is to learn etymology, and as well as I put her name in the chat, Dr. Yafa Bey. She is a more established what's that word that you call it when you national, like when you've removed your American civil, that when you've moved your normal status and you now call yourself more to say that you're native to the land of America, so it gives her certain different rights. But she educates on how to do that, and she educates on how to use the dictionary, and she also educates on how to read the Bible, and breaks down simple codes that will even help you discern a little bit further. So I recommend people to check out Dr. Yafa Bey. Yeah, and that, yeah. And if anybody who'd like to please take over for the next chapter of the two that carried on.
Well, to summarize this particular section, it just talks about how Christianity grew through Egypt. After Egypt was conquered and basically all Blacks were expelled out of there at the end of the 25th dynasty, really control for Egypt mainly became white on white violence. The Egyptians were no longer just the Afro-Asians. It basically became the how we use the term American. So basically all white nations, all white nationalities included were under the title of Egyptian. And one thing in particular that at the end of this, he goes on to talk about how it took a very, very, very long time for this kind of destruction to happen to Blacks. Destruction meaning basically them, what he says on the bottom of 138, he says the long struggle to take from the Blacks whatever they had of human worth, their land and all their wealth therein, their bodies, their souls, and their minds, was a process of study, depersonalization, and dehumanization. I did the math with these dates, and I'm sure these aren't all the dates, but it took nearly 3,000 years for this to occur. But on the bright side, like the code says, a job that something that this was obviously created by human beings, therefore it can be eradicated by human beings. So that was my little summary from this section and things that stuck out to me of interest.
Yeah, another thing that was really important, I think, is that the white invaders, white supremacists, they would attack black places, and then they discovered that some of these blacks cannot be defeated with the sword. Some of like because they just keep rebuilding and coming to get revenge, or they keep defending too well. So then this is when I believe white supremacy got a little bit more refined and how they're going to go about and dominate people. And then we see an increase of like white ideology, like religion being spread amongst the black, because they figured, hey, we can't dominate them by force. We'll use our ideology, we'll use our culture as a parasite to erode them and to make them like us, and they'll subjugate and mistreat themselves. So that is what I believe the section picks up on as well. How somewhere down the line the whites and the Arabs realized that, hey, we can't beat these Africans all the time in battle, so we must use different tactics. Thus, white supremacy was refined.
And then just to add to that as well, like towards the end of the section, it kind of talked about how whoever had control of the seacoast, which is like the world trade at the time and similar to now, but it almost says like whoever has control of that can be like economically stable. And it talked about how Ethiopia at that time had economic dependence because they didn't have control, because at that time Asian, European, and Egyptian controlled the world trade and had took hold of the seacoast. So I think like even bringing it like forward is like thinking of those tactics of like what position do we need Black people to be in order to like gain their independence again, or just gain themselves again. And it's just like thinking of like world trade or like the sea, and just thinking how Africa exports a lot of their goods because of how they get most of their income. So it's just like if they didn't export their goods, and I know Kwaku had mentioned this in previous meetings where he said that they were thinking about like trading amongst each other, and like each of the countries trading amongst each other, and like seeing how that could work. But it's interesting to hear that, because I would love to see like if that can sustain them for some time. You know, I don't know how long it would last, but like if they could trade amongst like all the countries in Africa, if that would be enough. But then recently I know like we're talking about, well, I was talking about separately about how income or money there is in comparison to like US dollar. So I think that is like another issue that comes in play too. So I think it's just like a lot of things to think about, but also like think about what position do we need Africans to be in order to like almost be sustainable of their own.
Yeah, I don't have too many notes on that. That was kind of everything that I had on this. One other thing that I would add is just kind of like the term Egyptian. I kind of spoke about it in a previous session, but really how this term almost, for me, would almost cause confusion now, because I don't know which Egyptians they're even talking about anymore. I think I might just say ancient Africans from now on. It's just a personal thing I wanted to share. But we can go ahead and get in the closing comments if nobody has anything to add. Oh, one other thing too. He also goes on to mention how this how they since Afro Asians did couldn't win recognition as Egyptians, how that is kind of similar to South African apartheid because you have the Afro Asians which are classified as colored because they're not blacks but they're colored and they're fighting with the white Egyptians. So it's kind of funny how I shouldn't say funny, but it's just I guess a pattern how these colored Egyptians, the mulattoes were kind of heralded as the upper class in Egypt, and now they have been relegated relegated back to I guess slaves similar to the black Egyptians because now black Egyptians are no longer within ancient Egypt, at least to my understanding. And he just kind of gives how that is similar to what's going on in South Africa. He says the same development is now taking place in South Africa, where the coloreds, once fanatically devoted to the whites, are now bitterly resentful because their privileged status vis-a-vis the black is being steadily reduced. That's that it just always comes back around full circle.
Yeah, my closing comments would be that what came to my mind was how was well something that both Trey and Mary alluded to was that oh, what was it? It was so clear a minute ago. It'll come back to me, but they study animals and use stimuli and all kinds of psychological strategies based on sort of like what Mary was saying, how they removed the real reason behind why we like glitter and just gave us the glitter. So they promote certain behaviors based on the knowledge that they have. And I think their whole premise, their whole objective is to keep us in an animal state, an animal-like state. And if you can keep a person in an animal-like state, only concerned with food, clothes, shelter, then you can keep them dominated and you can keep them under control. And that's why I think it was so important for them to, as much as possible, as much as they could, and eliminate our, totally stomp out our writing, our languages, and then feed you things that your lower nature will be attracted to. And so that way we'll forget about our spirituality, our intellect, and just be animals and operate at that animal level.
Well said, Ben. I believe you are in an area confusing me with the name you mentioned. Trey has not been.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. But yeah, closing comments would be just the destruction of Black civilization was not something that took place overnight. It was a long, tragic, drawn out process. Largely attributed to us losing our knowledge, losing our written doctrine of our own, and thus taking on white supremacist ideology and doctrine, and us being trained in the systems of being mistreated and to mistreat each other. Fast forward to 2021, Everything that was done to us definitely is manifesting again, and the symptoms are still here. Um, Case in point, just the gold chain wearing, so-called black culture that is very prominent. It all can be equated to being dominated by the system of white supremacy, racism, and also can be equated to a very, very, very pitiful reaction to white supremacy, racism, and a very, very insightful book and discussion.
And then just to close off for me, man, I just feel like every time I read the sections, I just learn, like I'm not learning surface level anymore. So it's kind of just like a lot of information to take in and a lot to follow, especially since there's like a lot happening and also through like different stages, but it is giving a clear cut of how white supremacy came into existence and how Africans were defeated. And also like going into here, it's like thinking about Christianity and how it's so like widespread, is that as long as people still believe in Christianity, they will always be under the hold of white supremacy. Just because I feel like even going through this and saying like, oh, well, as Ben mentioned earlier, we heard a lot of biblical names coming up and they didn't have any tombs. Or it's just like just a conversation of like, who are these people, you know? You say you only have these letters and these sounds, but like you have these names that obviously weren't created back then. So it's just like so many histories and just so many things that makes you question and makes you think about it. And I can only just imagine like even diving into like the Christian religion, it's like you're almost going to question your existence, but only if you just believe in God and almost just pray every day that everything will be all right. But then you wake up the next day and white supremacy still exists. So it's just very interesting, the dynamic of this and the stronghold it has on Black people, well, non-white people, because a lot of non-white people who practice Christianity and almost just like, oh, if you don't believe in Jesus, then you're going to go to hell. And then I just, it's just very interesting because I had someone tell me that and I just look at them and I just say, well, I guess you're going to be there too. So it's just very interesting and to read this and continuously look at today's society and see how many non-white people are still practicing Christianity and still keeping hope and seeing people being shot in the streets and they're okay with that.
Yeah,
Well put.
White supremacy, racism is hell, I would say. And I remember I was going to say earlier, Moses, I discovered through reading that Moses' parents didn't like that he married a black woman, black female. So even the if Moses existed or not, even just the ideology is still embedded in anti-blackness. So Moses, anti-black, his parents were very, very displeased at him allegedly marrying a black female if he actually existed.
Mhm. Hmm.
Yeah, just to give my closing comments, I really get a lot from these meetings because I've had the destruction of Black civilization and I don't remember a lot of it that I had read before, but I know that the information I'm reading now, it's going to imprint with me because I've been sparked so many times by the different perspectives that's come out today on these chapters, and there's just so much more that I gain from these discussions than I would ever do reading it by myself. So I'm highly grateful for that and that shared validation and building of confidence of our African heritage and culture. And also, I'd say we definitely need to zone in and learn the language. But I'd say what these chapters are really telling me is mainly telling me, due to the European efforts on erasure and confusion around these languages, first we need to fully learn how to come out of the confusion by understanding truly what the English language is, understanding etymology, understanding what we are saying to ourselves, understanding what we repeat to ourselves, what we are spelling to ourselves, with, especially as we grow into, like Ben is talking about wanting to go vegan. The more that you do this, the more you're going to be more in touch with your spiritual nature, and the things you say or call upon, you are calling into existence, and you have a clearer stream and channel. So in doing so in English for now, as we are learning other languages, we need to master and understand truly what's being said. Ask, even if you think you understand what a European person has said to you, especially in your place of work, ask them, what do you mean? So they would have to give a different explanation and let it be said in that way, because these words that are said to you will confuse you, and then you be in a daze, and then it's just ways of fortifying your mentality by keeping on code, of course, and asking questions. But mainly, I feel understanding and learning what etymology and the root of their words, so it can be dismissed how it needs to be in the right circumstances, while again gaining moving towards learning one of our own ancestral languages, like Swahili, choosing a language that we globally discuss, and of course develop a future language that can be more, I wouldn't even say secluded, because at the end of the day, we're spread throughout the diaspora. We will have to share it amongst ourselves, but find a way to codify that as well. But yeah, that's all I like to conclude. Thank you so much.
I like to shock people, you know, these Christians. I shock, like my brother, he's this raving Catholic. And I like to say, no, I do not have faith. And then as a matter of fact, the word lie is at the heart of the word believe. Because if you have to believe it, that means it's probably not true. What I do tell them is, I know. I don't believe in a God. I know. And I don't even use that word God. I believe in creation. I mean, I don't believe in creation. I know the sun is in the sky and the stars in the ocean, the river brings life, and the trees give us shelter, and the forest and so on in nature. I know I can look out there and I know I see a tree. I don't believe I'm looking at a tree. I don't believe I'm talking to you people right now. I know it for a fact. And that's what the Africans knew. You know, they knew of this great creation and the cooperative laws of nature. You know, Midnight has a song where he says, the earth is the law. The earth makes the law, not man. And they want you to believe in some bullshit. Is anybody still there? Am I?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay. I don't like this. I don't like not seeing people.
I've migrated to the kitchen because I have to prepare food for work tomorrow.
So people have their cameras off because they're multitasking?
I believe so. That's my
We're still
guess.
recording.
Oh,
In the recording.
Oh, Tracian, yeah, I think everybody's concluded. Has everybody concluded?
Yeah.